Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to just a tremendous edition of Americans in Create Soccer. It's an amazing edition all the way. And we have a great introduction of Living Thing from ELO. And the reason why this is the introduction of this great song is from the great sir that I have alongside here. This wonderful sir that it is, Derek Rae, this historic commentator, alongside here with me today as today's first major guest for this Americans in Create Soccer show that I do with my friend James Eddy, who's actually, Derek, since you're in Massachusetts, he is a truly Boston native all the way in Dorchester. So
not too far away from me.
Yes, and you are a Massachusetts resident all the way now. So, I mean, congratulations on that. At least, I don't know how long it's been. Probably been for a long time, considering, the 90s is when you really made that American wave, obviously. We'll get into that. But how long have you been in Massachusetts?
Well, it's been two different spells, Andrew. In the 90s, as you said, I came to Boston, first of all, in 1991. I went back to the UK 2009, 2010, and then returned to Massachusetts in 2017. So even though I don't sound like your typical Massachusetts person, it is dear to my heart, and I've spent a big chunk of my adult life here. But thank you for that very kind introduction and for playing ELO's Living Thing, the great Jeff Lynne, and, living things. That's what we all are. We're all trying to live it our way at the moment.
Derek, man, you truly, with that song, showed, there's few people that reserve the level of saint because, we have our representative John Lewis, or not my representative overall, because I don't live in Georgia, I live here in New York and Brooklyn, but a guy that really was considered saint overall. And few people really, truly get that recognition or that distinction overall, I say overall, deserving. And I truly feel that, you certainly are that. Can you hear me, by the way, Derek? Just make sure my connection's good. Yes.
Yeah, I've got you now, Andrew. I lost you just for about 5 seconds, but I have you again.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. It's just something where I truly do feel that there are a few people that you could say as a saint overall, whether in the professional news or in general. And I feel that you certainly have been been a person that has been a real class act overall, and especially doing this episode with me when you have so many accomplishments and so many things that you've done in this profession, particularly not only in just soccer, but in other sports too. And I really just appreciate you having you here to the point where I'm about to say, instead of New England, we need to call it New Scotland.
Well, I would have no objection to that, but no, you're very kind. I mean, listen, I'm no saint. I'm just a guy, and I view the world the way I view it, and I'm a big fan of reaching out to people and helping people where I can. The business I'm in has been very good to me. I've been very lucky. You have to be lucky in order to succeed in professional broadcasting. And I say that to people, you have to get your big break if that's what you hope to do. But there is no substitute for helping people along the way and trying to give something back.
Well, you're certainly doing that right now with this, and this is why it's great to have you on. And certainly you're more a saint than, say, Sergio Ramos, even though you're both big winners. So that's the thing that matters overall. And it's just fascinating, Derek, in this COVID-19 time, and then, you over here doing this where, it was great to see. Now, when the Bundesliga resumed as the first UEFA Big Five league, as I like to call them, like, in terms of the whole solidarity, in terms of the Big Five European leagues, it was something where I wondered if you were able to commentate any of like the Bundesliga official games from like overseas in Massachusetts. And is that regularly in normal times? Would you normally go over to Berlin or just any of the matches in Germany, in Deutschland, or would you do it remotely or back and forth here and there, because that's big for you to be on this side of the pond and then having to cover some games or do some games officially for them, or BT Sport or anything along the line. So how does that work for you? And if you did that?
Well, it works in the following way. I go to Germany a lot in normal times, and I had been in Germany, in fact, leading up to March. In February, I was in Germany, first week in February, actually just when COVID hit for the first time there. And so it's now a big void in my life, because that's really what I do. I live here in Massachusetts, but I travel a lot normally. And a big part of that is working in Germany. But obviously, I can't do that at the moment. And we have looked at ways by which it could be done remotely, but you can imagine yourself, it's fraught with technical challenges and,
Yes.
and difficulties. And you have to remember that the world feed that I broadcast is sort of the feed of record. So it goes to every broadcaster who has rights to the Bundesliga around the world. In other words, they might have their own commentary on the game, or they might not. They might take the world feed, but even if they have their own commentary on the game, the world feed is the fail-safe. That's the thing that has to be ironclad. So in order to do it remotely, everything has to be very buttoned up. And I think certainly at the end of last season, the technology wasn't quite there to make it as buttoned up as it needs to be. I mean, you could do it, but there might be dropouts and there might be technical imperfections. And I think we're all just trying to get to the point where we can say, we don't really have the danger of technical imperfections. But yeah, I won't lie to you. I've missed it greatly. It is a big part of my life, being in Germany, working there.
Yeah.
And that's really why I've tried to share my passion for the Bundesliga with people on social media. And I'm still doing that now that we have German teams in the Champions League and Europa League tournaments. So on we go from there.
I'm telling you, between you and Stefan Bukowski, if I can remember pronounce his name overall, you two as how advocates you are as Scottishmen that truly do love German football and Deutschland football, and not in a way, well, I don't know Stefan as well like that as I do you overall, but it's something where it's not as like a malice towards like the English Premier League or Englanders or whatnot. It's a true, genuine love for like the quality that is the Bundesliga, and making sure, Derek, you didn't freeze or anything, right? Can you see me, Derek? Let's see if Derek, you're making sure he's not frozen. His stream literally froze. Yeah, Derek, sorry. Derek, can you hear me? Hey, Derek, I think I know what it was.
I think I have you back now.
Yeah, that was crazy. Thankfully, the recording is the technology for Zoom is so great. I'll probably get you back on this. I don't have your screen yet again. There we go. Yeah. The technology for Zoom is so great that it still kept the recording going. I think it was also my Wi-Fi connection overall, so I turned it to the stronger 5G. So that's what made it happen. And I was wondering what was going on. But now we're good. As I mentioned in terms of with Stefan and you, like it's a real love for this great footballing nation, and then how they truly do love their football, but also are their truly regimented, disciplined selves in a way where it's not even, it may be considered strict for some people, but it's really about trying to do things to the best as possible. And it's something where this league really, even in these times where we see people gravitate globally to the Premier League, and then more of the maybe parity structure of the Premier League is allowing other teams that compete and it not be dominated by just one team, that it still has this incredible support of young players, of just these great fans. And, a third Scott that I would mention in terms of really having that trust in the Bundesliga was young Oliver Bert when he was at RB Leipzig before, and unfortunately it didn't work out for him as much, and now he's in La Liga still making a reputation, I think, for Leganes, I think. But it's something where what was the thing that captivated you the most for loving the Bundesliga as you do, considering all the leagues that you could be aligned with, and then always truly being with Scottish football?
I think with me, it comes from passion for language and culture. And I discovered that at a very young age. I was lucky enough to grow up in Aberdeen, which is just on the other side of the North Sea, or north, obviously, of Hamburg. But we have a direct line by sea to the great port city of Hamburg. And I used to listen to German radio almost every day as I was studying the language. And that's really where it began with me, of course, in tandem with my love of football. And I discovered that here was another football league I could listen to, and I could understand it more and more as my German got better and better during my school years. And that has sort of stayed with me. And, the more times you go to Germany, and I think especially if you do speak the language fluently, you begin to understand how the country works, how people think. Not everybody thinks the same, of course. It is a democracy. But I sort of have always found down the years that the German way of thinking on most levels is a mirror of my way of thinking and my worldview. And so on most sort of levels, from most angles, I found myself very much at home in Germany. I enjoy the way people are. I enjoy the company of my German colleagues, who, again, I'm missing greatly at the moment because of the pandemic. And we take it from there. I also think that the Premier League, while it's great, and I watch it as much as a lot of other people do, I find myself not having as much to say about the Premier League. And that's probably because there are so many other people who default to the Premier League as their league of choice.
And
So I often say,
it's the only league to watch, which I
right,
think
and which it's not, which it's certainly not the only league to watch. And I sort of think when it comes to the Bundesliga, particularly when the Bundesliga became the first top league to come back following the initial phase of the pandemic, I thought, well, I have something to say about this in a way that maybe other pundits, other journalists, other commentators don't, because it's what I'm covering. And you know, to be honest, that's been really enjoyable, sharing that and getting people to think differently about a league that they're obviously aware of. But if your focus is, you know, 7 days a week on the Premier League, it doesn't leave too much room for the other terrific football that's out there, no matter what country you're talking about.
Preach it, Derek. And that's the thing that a lot of Americans now have, you know, they fall into that problem where I will be this. In the 90s, it was a balance where, as you know, when you're trying to even have soccer get a platform in this country, and then you and Tommy Smith with Champions League come over, and I'm going to talk about that because Tommy's such a genuine guy, and how, you know, nowadays, those days I do long for a little bit because of how just special it was, where it was like soccer really trying to grow after the 94 World Cup here. And, you know, it was something where Serie A, with many Italians here on Rai International, got a lot of love, and the Premier League was hard to find. Like, you couldn't even find it. So it was really the Champions League and truly just Rai International. Serie A is just the regular domestic league that we would see over here, you know, with MLS trying to rise and then MLS being dismissed. So it was a thing where you just had that league, and the Premier League would be here and there, but it still would be Fox Soccer World, but you had to have Fox Soccer World on the cable on your cable thing, and even that was still luxury channel. And then it was still FA Cup games in the future before they even fully put them on pay-per-view. It was really still hard to find, and you know, eventually Fox, you know, through, I guess, Rupert Murdoch a little bit, really pushing for, you know, the Premier League to be covered on there, you know, really then started to then make its foothold here. And, you know, at the time before any of the other leagues from like a broader standpoint, you know, then how Serie A was just on Rai International, and that was a channel that was just dedicated to Italian culture. So it's something where people really didn't get those other leagues, and then it's already with soccer battling, you know, with American football, as you love the NFL all the way. We're going to talk about that too. You know, the NBA, and then you know, college football, college basketball, baseball, hockey. It's just so crowded, the landscape, that, I mean, if MLS didn't have a chance, and then if major, and even the World Cup could barely have a chance, and that's when we were in there, and then with how bad it happened with us in 1998, you know, it was something where it was really hard to get that focus about what was the thing that Americans were going to watch. But then I was dismayed smart with how bad we did in 98, and then with just how, you know, MLS really just really struggled off the bat. You know, really had a lot of humblings where you had, and you saw it covering, I guess, the Metro Stars maybe doing some games or whatnot.
The Revolution, actually. The Revolution for the first few years, and the Metro Stars for a spell too.
Because Tommy was covering the Metro Stars, and, you know, and when this all started, you have empty stadiums in Giant Stadium or in Foxborough Stadium. You know, it's really hard to really get fans to really care. So just your whole thoughts on that when you were, you know, before even talking about doing Champions League here. Your whole thoughts on that from your perspective in those days.
Yeah, I mean, I remember similar things to what you're reflecting on there. In the 90s, when I first arrived in Boston, I lived in the Italian section of Boston, the North End. And so my weekly football fix was Serie A. And I used to go to the Italian coffee shops and watch it with people from all over the world. I loved it, actually. People from all over the world, and there was a sort of a coming together. But that was the league, I'm not going to say the league of record, but it was arguably the best league in the world at that time, in the early, late 90s even. And the idea of watching the Premier League, well, you could do that in certain Irish pubs here in Boston, but that was about it. So it took time. And there've sort of been cycles, that there have been cycles of La Liga being arguably the better league than Serie A. It was never quite as easy to watch La Liga back in those days. And I think maybe younger people forget that. They sort of assume that it's always been there and it's always been available.
I'm getting old because it was hard. It was, and it was hard for it to capture any imagination here. And the fact that even though, being one of the 32 best nations should never be discounted, it's this whole thing where if we're not number one, then there's no need for us to play. So we're at the bottom of the global final tournament and doing this after the World Cup in '94, where even though we had good spirit and went through the group stage and played Brazil pretty decently, but
yeah, I think the one thing that I would add is that if you were to look back at, say, the TV ratings for MLS in those early days, and I was doing mostly local coverage in New England, and also, as you said, in the tri-state area for the Metro Stars, I think you would find that the national ratings were probably better than the ratings for, say, international club football from other countries and things like that. And there was definitely a focus on the American game at that time. There wasn't this sort of flirtation or even passion for the Premier League because people didn't really know what it was. That came much later. And now you have the challenge for MLS on multiple fronts. In the old days, the challenge for MLS was to do better than the American sports. Now the challenge is for MLS to compete with the Premier League, with the Bundesliga, with La Liga, with the Champions League, with the Europa League. So the task facing MLS is arguably more difficult now, funnily enough, than it was in the early days when it was just trying to establish itself.
And this is why I feel MLS needs to really focus on Liga MX as they do that and just think about that, think about the Brasileirão, whichever designation Argentina wants to come up with this league, which is always baffled me that they never had a name. I guess they used to use Primeira A, but it changed their structure where Brazil really does have it right where the Brasileirão, I honestly have on my rankings, I feel it's a better league than the Eredivisie and even Liga Nos in Portugal, considering the talent that they have had in there where, it's still for me distant behind Leon, in terms of the fifth, but I feel that it's truly become the best league outside the UEFA Big Five leagues. I will say both Bundesliga 2 and the championship, I think really have their own case as well. But I think, with MLS, it's something where it's like the NBA in terms of if you have the basketball leagues in Europe, whether, with Euro League and then the Spanish League and the Turkish League and the Israeli League, that they're just not gonna really compete with the NBA anytime soon or whatnot. But you can still utilize certain things in terms of being able to make your league unique and just focus on your own backyard. And that's something that I feel that MLS, detractors try to use that against them. And I feel that MLS, loyalists from day one, or if you're Don Garber, is something that I think is a question that they, to me, obsess about too much because realistically, the soul of the game is always going to be, in England, in Germany, in Italy, then, Brazil obviously going over. It's just something that it's just hard to really see that if we don't prioritize it as number one here, then how can we, then think that then we're blessed because just because we're America, we deserve to have the best of everything. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I've sort of moved away from thinking that it's that important for the US to be the best in this particular sport. I'm more concerned with more people becoming aware of it, and I don't really care ultimately what league you like best. Doesn't really matter. If you like Portuguese football, watch Portuguese football. If you like Scottish football, watch that. If you like MLS, great. It would be good, I think, if more people watched American soccer. It would be, because in Scotland, people in my home city of Aberdeen, they watch Aberdeen. They don't so much watch Paraguayan football or football from New Zealand necessarily. I'm saying that to exaggerate the point.
The A League is interesting down there. It's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah.
But one great Bayern, great hope for New Zealand over on the team, Young Singh, who really was sensational in the A League.
Yeah.
I really hope he can have like an Alphonso Davies type situation where he's a real talent. Singh when he was A League, newcomer of the year, and they got a great culture down there in New Zealand, in Australia, where honestly my favorite maybe soccer match of all time, excluding the U.S. against Portugal 2002, was what happened 10 years ago in that interesting World Cup where New Zealand honestly should have beat Italy, in terms of it really fascinating where they really were tactically. That was a day where you had to feel, that Italy was there back in 2006 in terms of how they just really were not the same side that they were that won that World Cup 4 years ago. And I really enjoyed that match. And it was that match and really everything that happened in the '02 World Cup that made me say, you know what, this is really a global game now. And this is not just going to be dominated by Europe's big clubs, Brazil and Argentina.
No, that's right. And again, it's cyclical. It comes in cycles, and you have different countries who come through and do exciting things. And that's why we love the World Cup, because it changes. The dynamic changes every 4 years. I remember, watching Cameroon and being so enthralled by Cameroon in the 1980s, 82, first time I'd ever seen them. And they were in a difficult group, and everybody thought they were going to get thrashed by Italy, by Poland, and by the team in that group. And lo and behold, Cameroon drew every match, and they were arguably better than their opponents in every match, at least on the same level. And that began to open eyes. And, the same with other parts of the world, which previously had been underrepresented, certainly, but not thought of as teams that you watch at World Cups. And New Zealand, that example back in that World Cup, and on we go. There will be others down the line who will come forward and surprise us.
Yeah, and that's something where, and I'll get into that. Well, it always drives me nuts in terms of the World Cup when we always try to put the stereotypes of certain nations and think that just because their past lineage is going to be what they are in the final World Cup. Where I'm glad that people now won't just say, oh, if it's Italy, they're going to play Catenaccio and be defensive center back. Also, not the case anymore since like the mid 2000s. Like right after the World Cup, it's an open, fun league to watch, and it's really difficult for you haven't had a great Italian center back. Well, you can give love to Bonucci and Cellini, but they're not the level of Cannavaro, or the ones of the past, or as defenders, Nesta. They're just not at that level, you could say. And it's just something with the stereotypes where the last World Cup, people thought, oh, Germany, they're going to be just, they're guaranteed to always go deep in the tournament. They're tournament focused. And we saw clearly that did not occur, especially from that first match against Mexico and just how they played in South Korea, ending like their hopes overall, which was like fascinating to see, So it's something with Derek, before we, get into that overall, with the Bundesliga being the first league to return with COVID-19. First, your whole thoughts when the season had to be stopped, and how you thought, like, did you feel that, wow, this could be a thing that could last like a few months, or do you think that it could last like a few weeks, especially with how Germany really does, objectively speaking, people here, a better job at truly investing in healthcare than, say, here in America overall in terms of the full populace, or just safety-wise for health reasons. Did you feel it was going to last this long in terms of that lockdown?
I'll be honest with you. I'd been following the story probably more closely than I needed to, because I read the German papers every day, and this had been a running theme in Germany going back to the end of January, even the middle of January, when they developed a test before most other countries. And then we had a little cluster in Munich, and I was actually in the Munich area at the time, and I was a little bit concerned, I'll be honest, about what was happening in Germany at that time, and I was quite relieved to get home. But my honest answer is I listen a lot to epidemiologists, so people who know a lot more about this subject than I do. And what I was hearing at the beginning of March, when the Bundesliga was suspended, was that this was not going to be a 2-week or a 3-week thing. This was going to be with us for some time, for the long haul. So to be honest with you, I was actually surprised the Bundesliga was able to come back as early as it did.
Yeah.
And I will say, fair play to the DFL for the concept they put in place. There were many politicians who were skeptical about it, who thought it wasn't the right time, who thought it was too soon. And I think there was the element of the gamble about the whole thing.
Yeah. We saw the dressing players,
yeah,
getting COVID right when it was restarted. I was saying to myself, I'm like, even I know it was like our whole global love of sports was really, taking over, and then them seeing what happened in South Korea being able to resume. And it was, to me, a thing where I didn't feel at the time it was, even though Germany did a lot better, of course, than Italy and Spain and what's going on in predominantly England, because Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, I haven't seen it be as it's been in England, but it's still obviously there. But it's something where I felt that it was still a little too. I was like, I don't know if y'all wouldn't really do that. And I felt that Ligue 1 made to me the best decision. And how I feel that this is why I feel that PSG, despite maybe Russ, I feel that they're going to win the Champions League, because I feel that this was a thing that I think that just to be so safe and secure, and have it contained, because now we have Atletico Madrid players being tested positive for this. So. I was like, even with Germany, I was like, I don't think they should restart. And credit to them, when the restart happened and after the Dresden players tested positive, I didn't see any, major player that tested positive that I can recall. At least
no, and there have been a couple of cases just in the last week at Köln, for example, but obviously we're talking about in a closed season situation or a pre-season situation now.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that the main point is that Germany did it, and in order for them to do it, they had to get agreement at all levels of government, from state level. Germany is a very decentralized country, as you know, to federal government. And but the significant thing was, Andrew, the case numbers were down. In fact, so far, down on a level that you can't really imagine here in the USA. I mean, I'm talking to you from Massachusetts, and we talk here about how we think our state has done relatively well compared to others in getting the numbers down. But still, our daily numbers that we are recording now in Massachusetts would be considered high if Massachusetts were a country of 7 million rather than a state of 7 million. If we were a European country of 7 million and we were recording 320, 330 new cases every day, that would be a cause for concern in that European country of 7 million.
And
so I think
New York too, despite us doing contain, because of, and I, saying this for the record for people here, not Derek's opinion, but I feel Democratic governors overall really try to do the best at trying to be as safe as possible, especially in big populated cities, compared to certain Republican governors who still want to have certain businesses open here and there, or certain things open because they want the economy to really flow. And it's just something where even in New York, it would be kind of like an issue in Europe, despite us feeling like we've contained it so much, from how disastrous everything was in March and April. So
well, I'll give you an example. Where I'm from originally, Scotland got its cases down to single figures until very recently. Now, we've had an outbreak actually in my home city of Aberdeen just in the last week, which has meant that Aberdeen has gone into lockdown. But again, we're talking about cases in just over 100 in a city of 200,000, and the city has gone into lockdown. And I have not heard of people complaining about that. Merely people saying this is what has to be done here. But I can imagine if that were done in this country, there would be a bit more resistance to it. So I think, I don't like to say people have done a great job or a terrible job. I just like to look at the science of the matter. And the fact is, Germany, we're talking about Germany initially here, they got their numbers down, which allowed them to have a proposal to let the Bundesliga and the second division, the Zweite Bundesliga, return without fans. And I think we can look back now and say, job well done by the DFL in making the proposal as detailed as it was. And, there was the element of gambling about it, but I'm not sure you can gamble when case numbers coming into your city or your country are on the higher side, and even to the extent of talking about somewhere like Massachusetts.
Well, definitely for sure. In terms of the four of the five UEFA Big Five leagues that resumed, Germany certainly was the best country, or at least the country that was most safe to resume. For the players compared to Italy, they really were stern with the lockdown, so they made sure, but it was still they had to delay with that. And the same with La Liga in terms of LFP over in Spain. And then in England it was really, I got to tell you, if it was under maybe a more liberal administration, the Premier League may not have come back. And then what really concerned me was when Liverpool clinched the title and seeing people in the streets, and that was one thing I said that, it was great for people that needed sports and whatnot, but I felt that unless like your country truly either had it contained or had the measures to contain it, that it was going to be, sports were going to be great to have, but it would be serving as a distraction for people to get together and maybe spread the thing overall. And I just feel that when I saw things in England, particularly with Liverpool celebrating their first Premier League title, obviously it's an emotional thing for them. And that whole feeling, especially considering that I thought the season was going to get canceled. There was a thought, there's thought that the season, or at least on my end, where it would have been better to end the season, give Liverpool the title then. But, people were like, oh, they didn't clinch, and this is what it needs to be, even though they're up realistically all these points and on a historic pace. That I just felt that for the safe matter, it would have been better to do that, where I didn't see specifically from those celebrations if cases really went up, but I'm sure that they probably may have done that. And I just felt that, out of all the leagues, quote unquote, the best league for me overall was the league that should be the example of the world and whatnot. And to me, should have taken the steps of what Ligue 1 and what the Eredivisie did, which was very bold for them to do, and cost themselves the money that they did, but for safety reasons really made, to me, a really safe, rational decision. And for their players' rest coming into this season, I think the Premier League really should not have resumed. I really do feel that way.
I think it was a gamble. I think it happened at a time when case numbers were still high, and it does look as though the players were very responsible and the people around the clubs were extremely responsible during that whole period. But on we go, and I wouldn't want to be a sports executive trying to make these decisions. I would not want to be in that position at all. I just feel, and I suspect you probably come at this from the same angle that I do, that talking to people who are in the epidemiology field, who know about the science of this, they will all tell you that there are real downsides to not doing enough. If you cover yourself and you do more, there is an upside in the long run.
Yes.
And I'm a firm believer in society, in making decisions for the betterment of society. I wasn't born in this country, so I don't so much have the same belief in my liberty means that I get to do anything and that we get to do everything because that's what we want. I'm a big believer that with liberty comes responsibility. That may not sound like a very American ideal. I actually think it probably would be if you were to listen back to some of the early American thinkers, but it's where I come from. I believe in free thought and in free speech, but I think we always have to think about the effect of our actions on society
Yes.
as a whole. And I'm not the sort of person who's prepared. And it's why I've been living in a bubble here in Massachusetts for 6 months, hardly venturing out. Apart from my evening walk, I'm lucky enough to live near the ocean, so I'll go out in the evening and walk for 5 miles with nobody around me. But I'm not the sort of person who's going to say, oh well, I should just do what I want and to hang with the consequences.
Preach, Derek, and sadly, even our founding fathers, at least in this country, even with them saying that, they didn't adhere that to all the people in this country overall, at least people my shade overall, and why, like, the Black Lives Matter message, like, resonates all the way through all walks of life, and including football. But, one thing I would say to you in terms of, like, specifically back to Bundesliga and back to the soccer on the field,
Sure.
is how fascinating it has been to see how Alphonso Davies has become the best left back in the world to me. Like, to be able to do in his second position, and how, the seeing the Leroy Sané signing, be kind of odd for me for Bayern Munich, considering that, they have Lucas Hernandez as a left back that could easily be tremendous, right there. And I feel that, Fonzo, this guy, and it's like maybe it's the Canadian way of truly, going about doing things and trying to do things in a way of being humble but still being diligent in that North American sense. And he's just really a fascinating story to see him when, he made that move for Vancouver Whitecaps. People were like hopeful, but they were saying, oh, it's going to take a few years. He's going to go off on loan somewhere, and then who knows how it's going to happen. And, that first, when he got to the club, the fact that he was even playing a bit and being on the bench here and there was impressive, but it's like he wasn't a big goal scorer in MLS, or at least dominating, like scoring 25, 30 goals or whatever, where it's like he's going to be a set starter, like battling, at least at the time, I think even Kingsley Coleman, actually when Arjen Robben was there last year. So, so it was like, he's not going to displace Robben still off the bat. And now he's come and truly, been humble enough to say, you know what, I'm fine with them moving me to left back. And all he's done, especially from Kovac and then with Hansi Flick, has been so amazing in this role where honestly, I feel he's better defensively than Trent Alexander-Arnold, who, one-on-one defending can be a little bit to the lack of desire. And Alfonso's 2 years younger. So it's remarkable what this. What's your take on how he's been this way?
Well, I don't think when Bayern signed him, they thought they were signing a left back for starters. But that's how it has turned out. David Alaba was sort of fixed in that position. And sometimes necessity is the mother of invention. And Bayern found themselves early in the season needing to come up with a bit of a solution to a problem in defence. And that was because Hernandez, who you mentioned, had got injured. It was early days for him at Bayern. Niklas Süle also injured. Jerome Boateng was supposedly on the way out, but all of a sudden he found himself back in the starting 11 beside David Alaba, who they thought, well, he could be a central defender. He's good enough on the ball, and he's ended up being magnificent. And that left a void at left back, and young Davies has moved in there and has been just tremendous. I mean, he is spectacular to watch. He, has the pace, the like of which most players could only dream of, but it's more than just pace. It's game awareness. It's utter confidence. You can see that about the game, about the way he believes in himself. And I'm thrilled for him. And I always enjoy commentating on his matches. And it just goes to show that sometimes the preconceived notions we have about a player being this or that, should be thrown out the window, because, a good footballer can play in a number of different positions. And sometimes it takes a mini crisis within a squad to find a position from which the player can excel.
And, it's something where good football can be from anywhere in the world. And it's something where I see Alphonso Davies is his path so far is the path that I hoped for Freddie to do when he went to Benfica, because I still felt that he, to me, even though playing at DC United early, I still felt that he developed well enough at Real Salt Lake where, and then how he played in the Under-20 World Cup, where I was like, okay, you know what? He's coming over there at the same time. Him and Angel Di Maria coming at the same time, Benfica. And unfortunately, and I felt that a little bit had to do with him being American a bit, but a lot of it, a good bit also was the fact that he was a player that didn't work off the ball that well, that he was someone that he was more quick than fast. With Fonzo Davies, I mean, he's almost looking like he's running against Usain Bolt. So it's so impressive seeing what he's done and to do his thing and everything like that. And it's just remarkable, like his whole rise, where it's a great discussion, even though I think he's clearly the CONCACAF Player of the Year between him and Christian Pulisic and Raul Jimenez. His incredible season for Wolves, where if you had to choose overall, because they will decide at the end of the year who would be your CONCACAF Player of the Year, you truly seeing all of them and then living here, like, Massachusetts, right, North America, right, where the award is at, who would you choose overall of the three? Because it's honestly the best CONCACAF contest ever for Player of the Year. I think ever in my mind.
Yeah, and you can make a case for any one of those three. I would probably give it to Davies. That would probably be who would get my vote if I were to analyse the three. I mean, I think it would be harsh on the other two because they're both superb and they do things so very well. Pulisic, I'm just not sure this is the year specifically to give it to Pulisic. I think there will be other years on that one. Jimenez is, unique really in terms of what he can bring to the table and what he's done at Wolves as well. Tip of the hat to him. But and again, I might be slightly partial here because I see Davies so often working in Germany. But for me, it would be.
You're 100% right. Especially coming from a very powerful American and who's interviewed Christian Pulisic before. He's right at Hershey, so he's right down the road here in New York. He's a Jets fan. He's a Jets fan like me. So I have my Keyshawn Johnson jersey here all the way. I'm a loyal Jets fan, Derek. Till fall, probably, because there's been a lot of issues with that, obviously, as you know, in the NFL. Jimenez has fascinated me because he was really a great prospect at Club America, where he was like the next Jared Bargetti in my mind. And then he went to Atletico. I think this is perfect for him. He's Diego Simeone's type of forward that he wants. He probably be the next Diego Costa. And it just failed. It just did not work out well. I thought that maybe he doesn't have the right stuff to be as good as I thought he was at a top club or at least in a top league. And he has went to Wolves, and him and Nuno Espirito Santo, I mean, they have been part of something that's really tremendous to witness overall. And you've seen it firsthand, whether you're, doing any freelance work for NBC Soccer, overall, just your whole thoughts of seeing him do his thing like that.
Yeah, I was at Molineux for a game. I was back in the UK in December doing a game for Prime Video, who had a small amount of rights to the Premier League for the UK market. And really taken with Raul Jimenez and the whole setup there. And I think, what I like about that setup is there's a bit of the old school about it. It's a very modern setup, but there is the old school in terms of how he puts his team out. And we don't see wholesale changes at Wolves. We tend to be able to say this is the Wolves' best 11, and there wouldn't be too many arguments about it. At most other clubs now, it's a movable feast all the time. But one fixed point of that team is Raul Jimenez, and everybody knows without him, they are greatly weakened. So and I think it's great to see a Mexican doing what he's doing in English football, because I remember years ago I was always told, well, Mexican players, they're not hungry enough and they want to stay in Mexico because they make money there and they're comfortable in their own environment, and most of them are not going to be very good travelers. But we've seen many Mexican players give lie to that, not just in England, but in Germany as well in recent years, and other countries too. And more power to Raul Jimenez.
Something fascinating that, with the Champions League in terms of now in Lisbon, a thing that's really fascinating me, and I feel it's really kind of unfortunate, is what happened with Gareth Bale's situation, with Zinedine Zidane at Real Madrid, where, I mean, it's something where I have to wonder, did he do something personally to Zinedine Zidane? Because, I mean, Gareth Bale, relatively speaking, like, I've never heard of him being like a prima donna or a very difficult person to deal with at Southampton and at Tottenham. And he wasn't the one that was the world record transfer at Real Madrid, that he was going to be worth more than Cristiano Ronaldo. He didn't tell them that you have to do that, or his agent. And I just felt that between him and Michael Owen, and it's amazing how David Beckham is like such a people person enough where I feel that there's a stigma with some Real Madrid fans towards British players, and I feel that especially with Gareth Bale, the fan base got on him anytime that they won. Then whenever he got injured, obviously was a big issue, everything and whatnot. But the guy went and scored so many still goals for the team. I think still 5th all time. I think in the club in goals, at least. And it's just something that it just really is baffling. And then how it ended, where when they won La Liga on the Casilla ground, they won it on his birthday. And he's in the stand, just being like, "Okay, I'll come down for the celebration." And then he decides last week, or probably 3 days ago, he says, "You know what? I don't want to go to Man City and sit on the bench and watch y'all play and everything." And it's just what it is. And it's just fascinating. What is your whole thoughts on that? And then, his future, where I honestly say he's been so devalued that if I'm Manchester United and I want to back up just in case, or if Sancho is all this money that we can't agree with Borussia Dortmund, I could get him and Usama Dembele, both of them devalued, and use them or whatnot to be part of my team. Like that's been my thoughts. Like, what's your thoughts on this? How Gareth Bale and this whole thing?
My thoughts with Gareth Bale are that it's quite reflective of how life can be in any other profession. It's just that with football, it gets magnified, and we talk about it to the nth degree. And I think in life generally, and we all know this, sometimes we have a boss, sometimes we have an office situation that for whatever reason doesn't work out for us. And there's no logical reason for it. It can be a lack of chemistry with your co-workers, with your boss. It can be wrong place at the wrong time. It can be somebody else is in the right place at the right time. And I think with Bale, it's probably all of those. I think he's, as you said, I mean, there have been times when he's really stepped up for Real Madrid and they have needed him, but he gets forgotten about. He is often the forgotten man. And other than that, I don't really have a logical explanation. It would be great someday to be able to hear his side of the whole story and his version of everything from A to Z, when the time comes to say goodbye. But I still think he could be an asset somewhere. I don't think we've heard the end of him as a footballer and as an influential footballer and as a difference maker. But the same sort of thing happened to Michael Owen at Real Madrid a good number of years ago. And again, they sign. And you might have said, well, why are they signing him? Because he's not an obvious fit with the Galacticos team of that time.
He was still scoring goals. He was still doing what he did.
He was scoring goals when he played, but it just and I think they realised that it wasn't a situation that could last, and it didn't last very long for Michael there. And I've spoken to Michael about that, and he doesn't really have any sort of answers either. He said it just was a chapter in my football career, and it started and then it ended sort of relatively quickly. But I think these things happen sometimes to footballers who, for whatever reason, don't fit in with their surroundings and their environment at that particular time.
Well, they better not do it to any Scottish player or whatnot, because they've done it to English and Welsh. And I would be easily remiss that I didn't talk to you first, at least about how you feel about the Scottish national team, because I always feel that there's still a lot of great players that, to me, that you produce overall, and that it's just sometimes unlucky that you guys or your team isn't able to qualify for major tournaments, at least since I think after '98 World Cup.
That was the last one. Yep, '98 was the last one.
Yeah, this is why Craig, you need to be on the show now, Craig, with all your sass and everything. I find Craig really fascinating and great, where I think he's actually underrated as a color commentator. And I think he's actually a genuinely nice guy that people don't really understand when they think, he's stern, he's tough. No, he's actually a genuinely nice guy overall. Just that.
Craig's one of my best friends in the business, and I worked with him in the UK for a good number of years. And we talk quite a lot. And Craig was a member of that Scotland team that played in the '98 World Cup, the last international tournament. And yeah, as a pundit, he's of immense value to the US audience nowadays, just as he was in the UK. But to your point about Scotland, I mean, I grew up with us qualifying for just about everything. We qualified for every World Cup. First one I can remember, 74, all the way through to 1990. We missed 94 in the USA. We were back again in 98. Since then, it's been a very barren story. And I think it's funny, back then, I actually think we punched slightly below our weight. I actually think we had better players than our performances showed. We always qualified, but we never made it out of the group. We never have made it out of the group at a major tournament. That's just not happened, which tells you a lot maybe about mentality. But I think since then, we have struggled to produce that level of player. And it has been more about, you were talking about stereotypes earlier, the stereotype for Scotland with people who have only maybe watched them in the last 20, 25 years would be, well, they try to be tactically organized and hard to beat. And for a while, we were quite hard to beat. I think things are changing a bit now because and this is typical Scottish bad luck, you might say, we have two genuinely high quality players in Andrew Robertson and Kieran Tierney. But the trouble is they both play in the same position.
Yes, I know. It plays back all the way, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a dearth of left backs in world football, you might say. But we actually have two very good ones. But now we're left with trying to sort of put two square pegs in a round hole, because you certainly want them in the team, but one of them is going to have to play out of position. So, you know, that's a sign that things are getting better. But I would have to say that still we are not there yet, and we have a long way to go. There's a chance, you know, if things happen the way we hope, that Scotland could be playing in the Euros next year, but there's work to do on that front, qualifying by means of the Nation League group setup, because Scotland won that group. But, you know, one of these days, Scotland will be back at a major tournament. I just feel so sorry for the generation that's come after me, because, you know, if you're a 35-year-old Scot right now, you really have very faint memories at best of Scotland ever being in a major tournament. Certainly people in America don't really, I notice, don't have much respect for Scotland, because most of them don't remember Scotland ever being at the Euros or the World Cup. Whereas, you know, my generation, that's all we ever knew. The World Cup anyway.
And I feel that she's, you know, besides, you know, both Robinson and Tierney, I still have like a lot of hopes for Oliver Burke when I saw him at Nottingham Forest. And for him to make that move and say, you know what, I'm going to leave, you know, Championship and Premier League, because he had a lot of interest in clubs, and to go at RB Leipzig. And I still felt like he showed, you know, he still was able to produce when he was able to get on the field. And I still feel he's very talented, where he, you know, he undressed, I think either Sergio Ramos or Rafael Varane he undressed really before Varane undressed himself this past Friday with the mistakes that he made, Rafael Varane. That I just feel that overall, because we got a few more minutes left, definitely, that Oliver Burke, I still feel that he can be a real star at the level that Robinson and Kieran Tierney, you know, has been. And I still also feel that, you know, have Scott McTominay, you know, be like an aside. I still feel that he can still produce some things. I still feel overall that I think Ryan Fraser as well. I still feel, you know, despite what happened in Bournemouth and everything, I still feel he has an ability to really produce and do things overall. And John McGinn, he may not be like top level, but he's really, you know, for Aston Villa to stay up, you know, he's to me someone that can still, you know, do his thing and make a difference in any match. So I just feel that the match that y'all played against England in Hampden Park was, you know, an example in the qualifiers for your school for World Cup. It was World Cup 2018. World Cup 2018. It was the game where it was unlucky that you guys didn't win on 3 points on that one.
That's sort of Scotland in microcosm, that game. If you talk to Scotland fans, they'll tell you that, probably should have won that game. And you know, basically we snatched a draw from the jaws of victory, as it turned out.
You're much more calm than Craig and Stevie Nicol, who I also got to get on here, and I had the pleasure of meeting him when I was actually interviewing for a job at ESPN 4 years ago at this time, or 4 years ago, week and a half ago at this time. Really good, really this wonderful guy. I'm glad that people over here, and because I didn't watch. Obviously, I wasn't even born when Stevie was a world-class player.
Oh yeah,
And,
great player.
and he's modest about that because you wouldn't know, honestly. He
No,
put the book out. He really was a great player for when Liverpool
superb player.
last were Premier League champions. Last were English champions when it was championship. And how fascinating it is. Like, there's two more things I gotta ask you. That whole thing about the Premier League, and as you saw with college football and college basketball here, but especially college football, there's always a great debate about what's the best league, and you see that the people in the SEC have their pride that they're the best league, and all of us that are not, in the SEC region, we always get annoyed about that whole thing. But it is truly a thing that they really produce a lot of the NFL players, because the South in this country just loves football, or like American football, so much. Now, obviously, the world loves football as much as any country loves football as much as many countries' number one sport. But there's something about, despite it being a ridiculous empire sometimes, that England, where the game originated from, and then it being humbled throughout the years, especially with their top league. And you saw with how, before the Premier League was made, how the championship was derided, a lot of, I guess, hooliganism that they said back then, and then you saw in the 90s how Serie A clearly the league, where you got all the top Brazilian players going to Serie A or going to just Barcelona or Real Madrid and La Liga or Valencia, other teams, when La Liga wasn't just 2.5 teams, as I call it, because I call it Simeone-Co Madrid, because Diego Simeone, thank goodness for Diego Simeone, because it would just be a duopoly overall. It was a league that truly, in early 2000s, they thought it was a backwater. Then you hear the whole tactics of, English Premier League, most exciting league, but it's not tactical. It's not technical enough, like La Liga, Serie A. And I felt over time, I think they really made the best decision, and a decision that was one of the maybe a good ideas with American sport here, was the fact that, we need to revenue share with all the teams without putting a salary cap on, like we do here, unfortunately, in America overall, and then we don't have relegation, obviously, because owners, want to protect their investments. So it's more about the full capitalistic nature over there in Europe than it is here, despite us being like that.
Yeah, I've always found that the ultimate irony, as somebody who studied politics when I was younger as well at university, is that, this is supposedly the ultimate capitalistic society here in the USA. Europe has supposedly got more social provisions, but when it comes to sport, it's the exact opposite. With football in Europe, it is survival of the fittest, and the relegation promotion system is a big part of that. Whereas here in the US, that there are always sort of provisions to keep things even. I would say it's probably more the socialism that we see in the sports here are socialism. Is socialism for the benefit of the owners mostly, so that they have a kind of a platform that they can work on.
That's what we call rich welfare over here overall. Like it really is, and that's the thing that's always fascinated me about, especially any league that has relegation, but particularly the UEFA Big Five leagues, because the drama of it all, and that's why you won't have any boring period in the season when the regular season is the championship, and how the drama of even when we knew Norwich were going to go down, finish last place, but still their chance of trying to survive. And then with Aston Villa and, with Bournemouth and Watford, that it still was that drama that last day, or, with the Bundesliga relegation playoff, seeing hopefully that Josh Sargent and Werder Bremen weren't going to go down to the high, the Heider, I'm trying to get the team's name.
Heidenheim.
Yeah, Heidenheim. The drama of that in terms of relegation playoff, or when La Liga does their third relegation playoff there in terms of their Segunda division. It's something that really is fascinating, and I just felt that the Premier League really, for that competitive standpoint, even though it's still dominated by certain clubs, that they had the foresight to be, and it helped that they were getting global eyes. But they had the foresight to say, you know what, it isn't good that we can have not protect the middle to lower clubs in terms of at least a sense of sharing any TV money. Yes, we're lucky that we get any global attention like we do, but it's something that there's global attention on, Real Madrid and Barcelona, El Clasico. Big time global attention on a lot of Serie A teams where AC Milan,
Sure.
Inter, Juventus, and they didn't want to go down that route. And then unfortunately the Bundesliga, and I feel that sometimes the German language is unfortunately an impediment towards that. But
Probably, yeah, probably.
yeah, it's just something where, and then that whole still horrible, viewpoint of people in Germany as being rigid and emotionless or whatnot, which I think is just very just horrible, honestly. And, particularly to people in West Germany who truly are more American or have that sense, from World War II at least, it's something where you see that, considering that, Germany represents a league where young players get a chance. That
Yep.
American players, they really, truly treat every player as, hey, this is who you are. I'm not going to put this stereotype on you. Let's see how you are. And that's something where, with Jadon Sancho's move from Man City to Dortmund, or, seeing how Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams, have gone their different routes, and of course Christian Pulisic and Josh Sargent, you truly see that in the Bundesliga where, okay, maybe they don't have the money the Premier League is getting, so there's more room for young players. But that's always really been evident, even when it wasn't just the Premier League getting the most money and being watched overall.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's right. And, the Bundesliga has so many things going for it. And you've mentioned all the young players who get their opportunities. It's also one of the last bastions of true fandom, if you like.
Yeah.
There's not a prawn sandwich quality to the same extent in Germany that we see in many other leagues. You can still be a fan and you can have a say in the affairs of your club in Germany. It doesn't really happen when you have rich owners coming in and essentially sort of decimating previous structures and decimating the sort of the local factor with the club. In Germany, with one or two exceptions for historical reasons, and we could talk about Leipzig maybe on another episode, but with most clubs, there is a structure in place that is designed to make the fans be a big part of all the decision-making processes and in terms of the atmosphere that's generated inside a stadium. So, it's on all levels, it's my favorite. I have to tell you, go on, Andrew. I've just got a note to say my grocery delivery has arrived.
That is true. That's what I was saying in my head. I was like, damn it, I need to get through the question.
But we can do one more. We'll do one more.
Who you think is going to win the Champions League? I think PSG is going to nip slightly Bayern and Man City, because I just feel the rest. I feel that's going to benefit them like how it benefited Lyon against Juventus. Who do you think is going to win Champions League?
I think Bayern. I think it's their turn. And again, you might expect me to say that, but I think that the only worry I have about Bayern, or certainly was, the fact that they've had this layoff because of the timing of their season in comparison with everyone else. But, they didn't miss a beat against Chelsea, notwithstanding Neuer's little mishap, but that's fine. He can put that to one side and on we go from there. I'm going for Bayern, but I respect what you say about PSG. I think it's going to have its own dynamic and, with no fans and who knows, really, you can make a case for so many different teams, but I'm going for Germany's Rekordmeister.
Derek, appreciate you all the way. Let me let you get on that grocery. It's just amazing. I appreciate you. You're tremendous, sir. Thanks again. And, once again, this episode is going to be live stream overall for people when they see it on YouTube. Thanks again, Derek. You're just an amazing person. Thanks a lot. Great friend. Now I call you great friend overall because I really do appreciate this, Derek. Thanks so much.
Andrew, thank you for having me on. All the best to you and stay safe.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.